It's February 1995. In a small glass office in Singapore, a young trader stares at his computer screen. On it, the numbers no longer make sense. Outside, London still believes he's a genius. What if I told you that this 28-year-old trader single-handedly destroyed a bank that had financed the Louisiana Purchase, managed the Queen of England's money, and survived for 233 years? What if I told you his losses were so catastrophic that this historic institution was sold for just £1 British? And what if I told you he did it all from a single trading desk in Singapore, while his bosses in London celebrated him as a genius? This is the story of Leeson in the collapse of Barings Bank. How did one trader accumulate over $1.4 billion in losses without anyone noticing? And why does this pattern keep repeating itself? Founded in 1762, Barings wasn't just any bank. This was the institution that helped finance the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. It managed the finances of the British royal family for generations. Queen Elizabeth II herself was a client. For over 2 centuries, the Baring name meant prestige, stability, and old money in British finance. But by the 1990s, Barings was facing a new reality. Derivatives trading, futures, and complex financial instruments were generating massive profits for banks like Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. The old merchant banking model was dying. In 1989, Barings decided to aggressively expand into derivatives trading in Asia. They needed someone young, hungry, and willing to take risks. Enter Leeson. Born in 1967 to a working-class family, Leeson didn't come from money or attend university. But he was ambitious, working his way up through back-office positions at Morgan Stanley and then Barings. He understood how settlements worked, how trades were processed, and most importantly, how accounting systems could be manipulated. In 1992, Barings sent Leeson to Singapore to set up their futures trading operation. He was 25 years old, and here's the critical detail. Leeson was given control of both the trading floor and the back-office settlement operations. In banking, this is like letting the same person write checks and reconcile the bank account. It violates the most basic principle of financial control. But Barings management didn't see the danger. They saw an opportunity. Initially, Leeson's strategy seemed brilliant. He engaged in arbitrage trading, exploiting price differences between futures contracts in Singapore and Osaka. Buy low in one market, sell high in another. Low risk, almost mechanical. And he was extraordinarily successful, at least on paper. By 1993, Leeson's Singapore operation was generating nearly 10% of Barings' entire worldwide profit. His bonuses were massive. His reputation soared. London management viewed him as a golden boy. But something else was happening. In July 1992, one of Leeson's junior traders made a small error, resulting in a loss. Maybe £20,000. Leeson panicked. He had built a reputation for perfection. He couldn't show a loss. So he opened a secret error account to hide it. The account number was 88888. 8 is a lucky number in Chinese culture, symbolizing wealth. The irony would become devastating. Initially, account 88888 was temporary, just a place to hide small errors until he could trade back to even. But once you start hiding losses, it becomes a trap. Every loss required riskier trades to recover. When those trades lost money, the hole got deeper. By the end of 1992, hidden losses exceeded £2 million. By late 1993, they'd grown to £23 million. By the end of 1994, they'd ballooned to £208 million, almost half of Barings' entire capital. Nobody in London knew. Leeson manipulated accounting records, forged documents, and provided false reports to auditors. An internal audit in August 1994 actually identified problems with Singapore's controls and recommended immediate action. Nothing happened. Barings' management was making too much money to ask uncomfortable questions. Meanwhile, Leeson used a classic strategy: doubling down. Every loss, he'd double his bet, hoping to recover in one successful trade. He was now betting with amounts that dwarfed Barings' capital, and he was about to face an event nobody could predict. By January 1995, Leeson was trapped. The losses in account 88888 had grown so large that he needed the Japanese stock market, the Nikkei 225 index, to stay above 19,000 points. He'd placed massive bets in a short straddle position. If the Nikkei stayed stable above 19,000, he'd make enough to cover his losses. If it fell significantly, he'd be ruined. On January 16, 1995, Leeson doubled down one last time, placing enormous bets the market would stay stable. He was now controlling futures positions worth over $7 billion, far more than Barings' total capital. The next morning, January 17th, at 5:46 a.m., a 7.3 magnitude earthquake struck Kobe, Japan. Over 6,000 people died. The Nikkei crashed. In 3 days following the earthquake, the Nikkei plummeted from above 19,000 to 17,785 points. Leeson's positions were catastrophically underwater. But instead of confessing, he bought more. Over 20,000 additional futures contracts, each worth $180,000. He believed he could move the market by buying enough to push prices back up. He couldn't. By February 23rd, the Nikkei had dropped to 17,580. The losses in account 88888 had reached $1.4 billion, twice Barings' entire available trading capital. The bank was insolvent, and they didn't know it yet. On the morning of February 23rd, a clerk from London who was in Singapore noticed something strange in the accounts. She tried to ask Leeson about it. He told her he needed to visit his wife at the hospital and left the office. He never came back. That evening, Leeson and his wife fled Singapore. He left behind a handwritten note, "I'm sorry." When Barings management discovered secret account 88888 on February 24th, they were in shock. The losses weren't millions, they were billions, more than the bank's entire capital. The Bank of England tried desperately to organize a bailout. They reached out to other major banks. But when they saw the size of the losses, they refused. The numbers were too catastrophic. On February 26, 1995, exactly 233 years after its founding, Barings Bank was declared insolvent. The institution that had survived the Napoleonic Wars and 2 world wars had been destroyed in weeks by a single trader. The Dutch financial group ING purchased Barings for one symbolic pound. Not 1 million, £1. The entire 233-year legacy reduced to the price of a candy bar. Nick Leeson's escape didn't last long. He flew from Kuala Lumpur to Thailand, then Germany. On March 2, 1995, he was arrested at Frankfurt Airport. He was extradited to Singapore, where he pleaded guilty to deceiving auditors and cheating CIMEX, the Singapore International Monetary Exchange. In December 1995, he was sentenced to 6.5 years in Singapore's Changi prison. While imprisoned, he was diagnosed with colon cancer. He was released in July 1999 after serving 4 years, having survived the cancer. He later wrote Rogue Trader, which became a film starring Ewan McGregor. But the critical question remains, how could this happen? The investigation revealed failures at every level. First, the dual role. Leeson controlled both trading and back office, allowing him to execute trades and alter records. Banking 101 says never give one person control of both sides. Second, the matrix reporting structure. Leeson reported to multiple managers, but nobody had clear responsibility for overseeing him. Everyone assumed someone else was watching. Third, the culture of greed. When Leeson's profits accounted for 10% of the bank's earnings, management didn't ask questions. They were too busy celebrating bonuses. Red flags were ignored because the money was too good. Fourth, the ignored audit. An internal audit in August 1994 specifically identified lack of controls and recommended immediate action. The recommendations were never implemented. After the collapse, regulators vowed to prevent this from ever happening again. New rules were implemented. Banks promised better oversight, but it has happened again. In 2008, Jérôme Kerviel at Société Générale accumulated losses of 4.9 billion euros using almost identical techniques. In 2012, the London whale at JP Morgan Chase lost over $6 billion. In 2011, Kweku Adoboli at UBS lost $2.3 billion through unauthorized trades. The pattern repeats because the incentives haven't changed. Banks still reward apparent profits without verifying risks. Products have become more complex, making oversight harder, and the culture of don't ask questions when money's flowing persists. Three critical lessons remain relevant today. First, complexity is a weapon. When financial instruments become so complex that senior management doesn't understand them, traders can exploit that ignorance. Leeson used derivatives his bosses didn't comprehend. Today's products are even more complex. Second, controls only work if enforced. Barings had rules about separation of duties. They had internal audits. They had risk management policies. But none of it mattered because nobody enforced the rules when profits were good. Third, the bigger the apparent success, the bigger the potential hidden disaster. Leeson's enormous profits should have been a red flag. When one trader generates 10% of a major bank's profits through supposedly low-risk arbitrage, something is wrong. Extraordinary returns always come from extraordinary risk, acknowledged or hidden. The financial industry has better technology now, more sophisticated surveillance systems, better algorithms, more regulatory oversight. But technology can't fix culture. As long as banks reward short-term profits without verifying risks, traders will find ways to hide losses and double down on bad bets. Nick Leeson destroyed Barings Bank, but he didn't act alone. He was enabled by a management team that prioritized profits over prudence, by a culture that worshipped apparent genius without questioning it, and by a system that rewarded risk-taking without accountability. The most disturbing part isn't that it happened. It's that despite everything we learned, the same pattern continues repeating itself in bank after bank. The question isn't whether another Nick Leeson will emerge. It's when, and whether our financial system can survive the next one. Subscribe for more investigations into financial disasters. Comment below, have banks really learned from Barings, or are we just waiting for the next collapse? Thanks for watching, and remember, when something seems too good to be true, someone is probably hiding the losses in account 88888.